What we need is for people to live for the struggle. Saludos and welcome to the Rematriating Borikén Podcast, where we discuss the journey to the essence of these islands, this archipelago and her surrounding waters, the restoration of our essence before conquest and continued colonialism, the reclamation of our collective healing and liberation. I am Yasmín Hernández, creator of CucubaNación, artist, writer, activist, born and raised in Brooklyn, Rematriating Boriken. Rematriation has been a very personal, introspective journey. For me, I and my family are coming up on 10 years in Borikén. And most of what I have lived has been kept locked within, shared only to a select few. And I feel and have felt the call to shift that. Over the past year and a half, I've been doing more to engage with other people on this journey, whether it be having activities, meetings, gatherings, in the earlier part of that time, to moving into more one-on-one conversations and interviews, which has been the bulk of that work of the past months, to creating the portrait series now of folks on the rematriation journey. I have long planned this podcast. I had initially planned on launching this podcast in the summer of 2022, and then I manifested the storefront space in Mayagüez that became CucubaNación, and me desvié, no que me desvié, sino another aspect of the work called, and that wonderfully gave me the home and a base from which to do this work. The podcast has been put on pause till now. I recognize more and more how these very personal experiences and these very personal and sometimes painful reflections that we have that we don't know how to share openly because we have been a community under siege, because of political repression, because of infiltration. We just don't know how to share openly. You see, as a Gen Xer, this social media thing can be both blessing and a very suspect, unsafe space for me, for the collective. But recently, we lost one of our community. Darshan Elena Campos was reported missing. Then it was later revealed that she had shared a desire to leave with the sea, as so many of our ancestors had done. Days after that news, which was paralyzing to so many of us, I found a recording. I had titled it, Rematriation is Not Self-Neglect, where I shared my observations on patterns I had been seeing in some folks of our community, concerns I had about seeing folks putting themselves in harm's way, and sometimes to hold on to the ideal of what rematriation could be. I talk about all of the sacrifices we were making to stay in it. I mention that if rematriation, or if all of this is bringing you a step closer to the grave, that it's time to reconsider. I then spoke to the importance of rematriation as living for this archipelago and not dying for it. And then I felt that I had made a massive mistake in keeping those reflections to myself. It's time to start sharing. This is an excerpt of Rematriation is Not Self-Neglect, recorded on August 23rd, 2023. Homeland and body are one. And the body is the stand-in for the homeland, and it is actually the ultimate homeland, because human beings have been largely nomadic since the beginning of our existence. We have had to migrate for various reasons, and for climate change, because climate change has always been somewhat of a reality, not like we jacked it up today. But there have always been seasons, there have been ice ages, there have been things that have prompted migrations. What always stays the same is the body that we inhabit from the day we are born to the day we die. Everything that we do, if we are taught that in order to love, we have to master self-love, we cannot partner, we cannot be in the presence of the world's most loving person and receive that love if we haven't significantly practiced and mastered self-love to the point that we believe ourselves worthy of receiving and are open to actually receiving. Rematriation, rematriate the body as the ultimate essence of what homeland is. So when I speak to rematriation, wherever you are, and that some of us don't have the capacity to move, it is exactly that. If you love your homeland, just like any person that you aim to love, whoever you choose to love, as a person or as the homeland, you can only practice that love and expand that love with your own capacity for self-love. Now, self-love, in order to flourish, requires self-care, self-preservation. Rematriation is never an excuse for self-neglect. We're being called back to our lands. We're being called back to our essence because our lands and our people collectively are needing that. So the answer to that call cannot be self-neglect, self-abandonment, putting ourselves in harm's way. Our people have engaged in too long a liberation struggle for us to actively engage in personal security threats, putting themselves in vulnerable situations over and over again. There are those of us who have been put in such situations, those of us who are not able to withstand and resist those impositions and are forced to live them. And because of that is why so many people are being called back. People who have been exposed to certain amenities, certain rights, certain privileges, have been exposed to certain even conversations where it doesn't matter what our income bracket is or is not. The currency is our own awareness and consciousness. Those being called to rematriate, they have seen different things in different ways across different times, different people in different places. See, when I first moved here, I always felt substandard. I always felt less than. I always felt too self-conscious because I wasn't born and raised here, and because I was sensitive to everyone's judgments and everyone's critiques of what it meant for me to have been born and raised in New York, coming here. Entonces se me quitó esa poca vergüenza when I realized that all of my heroes, all of the folks that I most admire, from Malviso, Betances, no chronology whatsoever, Schomburg, Capetillo, Lebrón, de Burgos, all of these people had crossed all sorts of charcos. And it wasn't just to the States. Some of these folks, Hostos, Betances, had crossed continents. That worldview, that expansive vision is what allowed them to do the battle. Folks are being called to expand the collective vision. For however expansive our vision might be over there, seeing what we've seen, seeing the cosmopolitan cities that combine people from all places, and the exposure to so many cultures, our vision is still limited if we have never lived here in our ancestral homeland. There is a huge part of the picture that we haven't lived and experienced in our own bones, and we're being called to go back and forth and to merge our visions and expand them in such a way. We're being called to expand. We're not being called to contract. We come with such a romance and such an ideal built in our heads. But in order to save the romance of rematriation, there are people putting themselves deliberately in a line of fire. And the shit is this. If that line of fire is not one where there is a battle being waged for your own liberation, if putting yourself in harm's way does not have your liberation As a direct outcome, you are further colonizing yourself and your people. And sometimes, as was told to me by Maria Velázquez, partner of Carmelo Felix Mata, the founder of various Vieques communities being gentrified and taken by colonial settlers today, they left. They left often. Viequenses displaced to St. Croix, and they rematriated and they returned. Life was made utterly impossible for them in Vieques. And what she shared, in addition to all the shit that they endured, is that they left often. They left to Philadelphia, they left to Florida, they left to all sorts of places. And what she said was, they never made it past 6 months when Carmelo would say, vámonos pa atrás pa Vieques. They left and they gathered their fucking nuts. And they brought them back. White people do this shit all the time. The Act 22 people work on one side, make all their money, come back here, live for 6 months so that they can get that tax break. We have to think outside the box. There is nothing romantic. There is nothing honorable about rematriating and saying that you can never leave this place. We have to exhaust every possible means. And if you have indeed exhausted every possible means here in your homeland and have not found a solution, it's time to look beyond the geographical boundaries of this homeland. And if the answer is not the States and you don't want to go there, then look elsewhere. But we are not ever going to be rewarded. Not you, not we, not us, not I, not anybody. For going hungry, for going without medical treatment. Rematriation is not a personal political campaign where we rally for votes and where we rally for supporters. Rematriation is a spirit, personal journey that we do to save ourselves, save our people, so it ripples out into the collective. If rematriation is putting you quicker into the grave, this is not your path. They have already killed enough of our prophets for us to worship. What we need is for people to live for the struggle and not die for it. This episode is dedicated to the memory of Darshan Elena Campos. May she and the other ancestors who sought solace in the sea find the healing and liberation that they seek. Rematriating, we are sometimes living in very isolated situations. Our communities are dispersed around the archipelago. Some of us are returning here without a family base, without a community base. And more than connecting with this land, the importance is in connecting with ourselves and ensuring that we are okay. Rematriate the body first, the mind, the heart, the spirit, with the guidance of this archipelago. If you or someone you know is in need of more support, you can try Línea Paz, 1-800-981-0023, o la Red Nacional para la Prevención del Suicidio, 1-888-628-9454. Nos queremos bien, nos queremos vivos, vivas y vives. Thank you for listening to the Rematriating Borikén Podcast. This is Yasmín Hernández reminding you that wellness is the weapon